Good morning. Welcome. I'm Gary Marcinini. I'm the Dean of the School of Information and Library Science, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this symposium on AI and knowledge work. It's a kickoff of a year-long conversation about how advanced technologies are affecting information-intensive work and how we can prepare students to thrive in this kind of competitive and symbiotic environments that they'll sure to encounter in the years ahead. We see this as a beginning of discussions that will culminate in a mini conference in the spring of 2022. There will be some live tweeting using the hashtag UNCAIWK for the discussion today. We'll have some links to the symposium website for follow-up discussion. We're really thrilled today to have such an extraordinary set of speakers and participants, and I want to thank them right now and for their time and expertise. This symposium is part of our 90th anniversary celebration here in the Information School at Chapel Hill. Thanks are due especially to Susan Sylvester, who's behind the scenes here making things work and who has been leading the organizing committee for the year-long celebration. And I'd also like to thank Freedom, the leading focus application company, for their support, and the SILS Alumni Association for financial support of our event. It's now my honor to welcome Professor Zeynep Tufekci. She is an associate professor here at SILS, currently a visiting professor at Columbia University and a columnist for the New York Times. She's going to sort of frame some of the key issues for the symposium. And so welcome, Zeynep.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you, Gary, for the introduction. I have about 25 minutes, so I'm going to spend the first part of my talk by trying to frame some of the questions that shape the space and that my colleagues at SILS and academics elsewhere have been working on, but that have a huge impact on how we live and work in the 21st century. So if you, at SILS, I have a treadmill desk. The reason I have it is that I now have a job that requires me to sit down for lengthy periods of time. So I try to compensate for that by arranging something that allows me to work while also, moving. And I also think better like that. And I've often wondered about how something like that would look like to my ancestors, who would know that I was walking pretty much, for hours at a time, completely voluntarily, at a job that allowed me not to do that. In fact, they might think I was just crazy, because I'm not grinding corn, I'm not grinding wheat, I'm not generating electricity, I'm not doing any sort of exercise, sort of a useful exercise. I am just trying to adjust to how work has evolved, because for most of human history, manual labor was a key way in which we worked. We lifted things, we worked in the fields, we hunted, gathered, all of that, all of that history. And the way that machines have taken over parts of our work life is quite obvious for manual labor at this juncture, but the way that AI and computation has crept into work to both augment and replace and change our work environment, I think has been less sort of profound in the way we analyze it, partly because it's happened so fast. The process of sort of replacing manual labor machinery is multi-centuries, whereas I remember, I'm not even close to retirement But I remember a period in which a calculator was a big deal to have or to imagine. But right now we have all these sort of capabilities that increasingly alter what machines can do with us instead of us, and sometimes against us. So those are the three things I want to kind of expand upon a little bit. When we think about AI, machines, computation at work, the first obvious way we think about it is as a tool for the person, as something that we use to expand our decision-making capabilities, the way we work, the way we can do something as a person. I think that part has been, it's fairly obvious to anyone who's working with a computer, who's working with any kind of machine like that. The other two parts, the way that they occasionally and increasingly not just augment how we work, but replace us, and also their role in supervision and control and discipline of the workforce has profound implications, as much implications as the first part. And I think that that's something that we will need to focus on to greatly reshape how we think about the value of humans, the value of work, and the whole contract, the social contract on which a livelihood is based. So to give a very quick example, we have had many cases in which people have found themselves where their work is being used to train machine learning models, a form of AI that will eventually replace them. You see this in areas like, say, content moderation, which is something that is, selecting the kinds of posts that can be flagged as misinformation or hate speech. We find that a lot of sort of the scale of the job requires machine assistance, but it's a very interesting, complicated scenario in which the work of human beings to label posts is then used to automate the function that they are doing. And in some ways, we welcome this development because this is essential given the scale. But in other ways, it's a hint of what is coming down the pike, in which our expertise and our human knowledge is being used to train systems that will not just work alongside us, may well, as time goes by, replace the way we work and our workplace functions. So in an environment like that, what is the future for the humans that, that's the basis of our society, because we're not just about getting things done in a more productive way. A society can function to the degree in which we have a healthy social contract. And a key portion of the social contract in this world is that, you have a job and you get paid to do a job, and that's how you pay for essentials and necessities. And if machines that are clearly not part of the social contract because they're not humans, can do a lot more that we alone used to be able to do, and not just to augment us, but sometimes to replace us, that might require us, and that will, not might, but that will require a major rethink of how we reimagine the social contract on which stability and a functioning, healthy society is organized. Another way in which the evolution of computers, digitization, and all these machines we use to work, and with the pandemic, as we have seen here too, increasingly just sort of at every part of our lives, bring unsettling shift and transition in the capabilities of supervision, but also measurement and control. When you have a world in which people can be supervised and surveilled down to the click and down to sort of the kind of metrics that would have been unimaginable, just a couple of decades ago. It changes the power dynamics within the workplace. So not only is the nature of work changing, the power dynamics within the workplace are changing. And the way we measure people and we compensate people and we fire people, all of those things are changing. And it's not these are things that are not like easily classified as, oh, it's terrible or good, because you can imagine scenarios under which these could be made to just make society more productive and healthy. But without a reimagining of the social contract within the workplace, that now comes with the kind of surveillance and capabilities our new work environment brings, it instead could bring a lot more conflict and a lot more difficulty in the kind of workplace we can imagine. So just to give a quick example of that, we have the evolution of the call center is quite interesting in that it used to be like a real career kind of job where you would be equipped to help customers, navigate challenges they may have dealing with your company. So as computation and computers became more advanced, a lot of times the call center became almost like a voice interface where the person that you're calling would be essentially entering certain parameters to the computer instead of you, and just work in a very restricted way in what they could do. And of course, companies also allowed people to enter their information directly. There was a time where you couldn't make an airline reservation without, calling someone or going someplace. And now we're all used to doing it online. But of course, in that setting, the people that are, working at the call center are often timed to the second on how fast they are. And because of just sort of the globalization and outsourcing possibilities and digital technology, they could be working at the other end of the world. They could be working at a completely different time zone, which is quite unsettling because they might be working nights. They might be in India or Philippines serving a customer base that's more North America, and constricted in what they can do, just entering what the customer is telling essentially into a different computer interface. And the next step to that is increasingly we get these robots. And in a very telling way, the robots are often gendered as female. We have a female voice that, robot voice that says, how can I help you? And the person, the call center person, is not necessarily available either, because that's just a cost to the company. If they can handle it with a machine, that's much easier and cheaper for them. So is this a good or bad thing is not really the question. It essentially means a certain kind of job that used to be a career and a way of consumer company interface is now a completely different kind of job in both the personal experience of the customer and the work experience of the person, including the fact that they may well be at the other end of the world and maybe alternative to a robot if everything else fails. So we see this at the lower end of the job market, like call center, and we don't really think about it for people like the professional classes, the kind of the doctors, the lawyers, and many other professions. But many of the capabilities are increasingly moving up the value chain there, especially thanks to machine learning, and are kept away from the workplace, not necessarily because the technology is completely insufficient, but there are licensing requirements that allow a certain kind of boundary keeping around the machines versus the licensed human professionals. But as artificial intelligence expands, we can see that threatened as well, especially since both the globalization of the workforce and the competition puts pressure on that. So the idea that, this is just sort of automation for easier, as we conceive them, jobs is not completely correct, but it does pertain how it plays out very much to the power relationships within, which of course includes licensing. So I don't expect to be replaced by a hologram that's doing the teaching instead soon. But as I said, that is not simply because I'm irreplaceable as a human being, but it has to do with our credentials, our norms, our licensing, and our status relationships within society. So the third part of the sort of the AI and workplace change has been a reimagining of the company, especially with the gig economy and platforms and freelancing. We're seeing the rise of a different kind of workplace arrangement in which the people doing the job are not necessarily housed within the sort of commercial entity, the company, but are cobbling together of freelancers, temporary workers, gig workers, and many other sort of arrangements that do not include the same I work for you, I'm the employer, you're the employee relationship. Now, in some cases, as researchers at SILS and other places have shown, in some cases, this can even be empowering in a way of social mobility for, say, people in the global south who now have access to freelancing at rates that are higher than what they would be able to get at home. In fact, at home, they would not. They would normally be locked out of those markets. But in other ways, it also can apply to people in more well-off countries who are highly skilled and in high demand, and they can use these kind of arrangements to make for a more flexible and even higher paid job experience for themselves. But on the other hand, if you're on the other end of this, where you're facing competition from this expanded labor force and the workforce that empowers the company to not have a relationship that's continuing with you, we find that a lot of people who used to have what we would consider, traditional steady middle class careers are finding themselves just trying to make ends meet by cobbling together freelance jobs that pay less than what they were used to, that do not have the steady scheduling that they had, and that are just a different kind of experience. And this can go along with AI being used to squeeze the last bit of productivity out of people. You might remember the brouhaha when it became clear that companies like, I believe Starbucks was using scheduling software to optimize for when they needed the people to be on the job, and they would log them out for the 1 hour downtime and then log them back in and not pay them for the time in the middle, which of course was useless that time to the worker. It is a world arranged for the convenience of the employer, aided by the AI and the computation and digital surveillance that it allows. Now, these are the big questions, but I want to say that we have faced such challenges before, and we kind of, we haven't completely dealt with the displacement of manual labor, but we have done a lot of things to try to deal with both the within work effects and the outside of work effects. Within work effects, like not having to do manual labor as a living, means that, for example, I gave a simple, straightforward example, but it just means that just exercise itself has become a thing that we pay attention to as a separate consideration. But for the social contract, we expanded things like education. We expanded safety net. We created things like unemployment insurance and disability insurance and ways of retiring, and certain considerations that took, that were a response to the fact that we no longer were agricultural societies where you kind of lived on a farm, you raised food, and your family took care of you when you were older or sick. to the degree this functions. So we had a whole host of arrangements to try to deal with this shift, to make the social contract work and make our lives more humane and functioning. And we're clearly going to have to do a large number of rethinking to deal with the challenges, opportunities, and all the things that computers, AI, machinery, digital technology, surveillance, all of that brings. And ideally, of course, the goal is to do this in a way that refreshes the social contract and healthy societies, and not just the considerations of productivity and profitability for the companies, which at the moment have become, increasingly powerful in determining these conditions, because our rules, regulations, norms, and understanding are from the earlier era, but we have new challenges that have not been accounted for in the way we think about it. So the purpose of this kind of symposiums work and the academic work we can do is that as academics, the public service and sort of the healthy societies is our goal. So we don't have to think within the confines of productivity and profitability, which are of course considerations in democratic societies, but also think about how do we rethink and reimagine a world in which work is an essential part of the social contract, but in a way that takes into account the new reality. So we're going to have like 5 minutes for question and answer. These are such big questions that I could only cover them very broadly. And I welcome, I believe Susan's going to moderate questions. I welcome any comments and questions in the short time we do have, and I look forward to listening to my colleagues and others in the symposium. And I think Susan will
thank you so much, Zeynep. Susan's having a bit of a technical problem right now. We can probably have some time for one or two questions. I was trying to take notes here, and I was really impressed with the notion of how machines and algorithms are going to fit into the social contract as an overarching theme, and then this your third point about it made me wonder: are we all going to become contract employees? And in the academy, I think this plays out in terms of the use of adjuncts and people who are, say, non-tenure track professors. So it really is taking place in all fields, and I think these are the kinds of issues that we really do want to address. How do we maintain a healthy society socially? Is I think your ending question here, and I hope the people on the panel and in the audience will take that to heart and begin to sort of craft arguments and questions around those issues.
And you raised something really important, because the technology and the political economy of this has always been intertwined, right? Sort of the outsourcing and flexible work, and sort of this push towards temporary workers with a different relationship and technology are intertwined, not identical, but intertwined things. So you see them happening all the time, the outsourcing, the gig economy, and then comes the apps, but they happen before and outside of it and alongside with it. So you essentially need, as you say, a rethinking of the social contract, where the technology is one more dynamic, which is altering power relations within society that affect labor and work. I think Susan just came back on.
Yes, she did. One question that came in is, are there specific examples of how AI/ML will aid or replace tasks done by professors. And I think all of us could probably take a crack at that, but you go, Zeynep.
Yeah, so one example is one thing that has become really interesting for me to watch has been the use of proctoring software because of the pandemic. Because you see AI not just doing something that's part of the classroom, it comes with not as a neutral stance, but as a pedagogical intervention, which highlights surveillance and discipline in the classroom, which is, I mean, I would object to it personally because I think the point at which the classroom is essentially like a surveilled workplace, which of course is also part of the problem, is not the pedagogical stance that is best suited to generating the kind of independent and critical thinking that we are supposed to be doing. But this is where the economic reality is very important, because if you've just got, you know, higher education funding being cut and people are in just these large classes and you need a mechanism to test, it's very tempting to just sort of turn it over to, is your eyeballs on the screen AI, and use that as a screening mechanism. And you'll see this cat and mouse game because people will figure out how to cheat it, and then there'll be more software. And you go down this path as a combination of economic realities and technological possibilities, but with ethical and pedagogical implications that are usually unexamined or unchallenged the way they should be. So that's an example of grading is another one. You see this with, you know, all sorts of things. It's kind of like almost like cookie cutterization of the educational experience, which also is an economic imperative. So it's not like, oh, technology is making this happen. It's combined with ideologies and economic imperatives.
Yeah, those are good examples, and you know, this happens in other areas of the academy as well. When you were talking about the gig economy in call centers changes, I was thinking about librarians and reference librarians in particular, and how that work has evolved over the last decades, and especially as people come. They've already done their Google searches before they come to ask their question. And so the level of effort and intensity goes up, but the level of productivity that we used to count for how many reference questions a day do you answer as a metric is no longer as relevant. So there are these interesting cascading sets of changes. Well, there are many other questions coming in now that, and I know that we are going to have to move on. We're going to save these questions, and I hope that this will be an ongoing conversation for the entire community. I want to thank you, Zeynep, for your insightful organization and framework for this symposium. And I think that will give us a way to come back to these touch points throughout the day and beyond as we continue to grapple with some of these issues.
And the questions that came in are great, and I'm sure they will be touched upon by many speakers. So thank you for that. The questions we could not get to.